My husband and I both work equal hours. I'm a hairstylist working at a salon and he's a warehouse manager. My mother-in-law is very sexist and lives in the 1950s still. She said women can't stop taking care of their households as a priority no matter what they achieve. I hated this and it caused endless problems between us. My husband learned to do everything from folding his clothes to fixing the toilet except cooking. His mom taught him that his future wife should do everything so he didn't have to learn. He defended me against her and cut contact with her. She hasn't participated in a gathering since 2015 due to family not wanting her around. My husband cleans while I cook, but he tends to complain from time to time and throws weird beliefs and opinions at me that are similar to what his mom thinks. I get it though, since he's been raised by her and this mentality takes time to go away. Last week he had guests over and asked me to help him host dinner. We agreed that I would cook and he would clean like always. Guests arrived and my husband sat with them while I was in the kitchen cooking. I had issues with the oven and I was running late and dinner wasn't ready yet. My husband rushed into the kitchen asking why dinner wasn't ready yet and I said I'd be done soon. He grabbed a few glasses while pressuring me to hurry up. I made a comment about how I didn't even get to meet his guests and how unfair it was. He casually said, "Just do your job," and rushed out. I was shocked and I stopped him and asked, "What did you just say to me?" He looked at me quizzically. I turned the oven off and stopped cooking. He was freaking out saying, No, wait, what are you doing?" while I took my apron off. I said I don't work for him to tell me to do my job and he should take over cooking if he thought I was being slow. He begged me not to do this to him and explained that he didn't mean to tell me to do my job. He said he wasn't paying attention. I refused to keep cooking and went upstairs to wash the smell of onion off of me. I left him in the kitchen to handle serving dinner on his own and he came upstairs 2 hours later after the guests had left and looked an absolute mess, hair messed up and his shirt stained. He asked if I was happy and proud of proving a point by backing out of cooking last minute just because he slipped and accidentally said, "Do your job." I told him that he's an adult and responsible for what comes out of his mouth, accidental or not, and again, I didn't have to cook for his guests and that I only volunteered to help him, and he sounded like his mother when he said what he said. He said it wasn't true and he was disappointed because I didn't stick to my word and left him to fend for himself and embarrassed him in front of his guests by giving him half-cooked meals over something so dumb. He walked out after changing his clothes and called me mean. He wants an apology for backing out last minute knowing he can't cook. Am I in the wrong? Story time about how I pretended to be deaf the entire quarantine. When quarantine started, I started an online course for a few subjects. To provide some background, these aren't my school classes or anything and I've never met these people before. There are maybe 10 other kids in the class and the teacher is actually pretty great. So the first 2 days go pretty well, but on the third day I mess up big time. We were in between a physics class that had already been going on for an hour and I'd completely gotten distracted halfway through. I have an incredibly low attention span and this was already too much for me. When the teacher called my name to answer his question, I had no idea what he'd been talking about, so I tried to Google it. However, I have shitty internet, so it took a really long time to load and the teacher was getting pissed as to why I wasn't responding and why I was typing. So, completely freaking out, I decided to text him on the Google Meet chat and make an excuse that my laptop's audio and microphone weren't working that day, and I'd been reading the subtitles which took a long time to load, so I hadn't quite gotten to his question. In my immense panic, I phrased it somewhat vaguely and said, "I can't actually hear. I've been reading the subtitles and they take a long time to load." To which the instructor said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't aware that you're deaf." In my intense panic and anxiety, I just went along with it. Dumb as hell, I know. It actually worked out fine. I tap out all the answers that were sent to me and even bought a hearing aid sometimes and wore it in class. Now I say sometimes because I don't actually have the focus and commitment to remember to put it on every class. When asked about it, I told people in the class that even with the hearing aid, I can't hear much, so I don't usually bother wearing it. They bought it. Everyone in class liked me a lot and they found me very endearing. There's a girl, Carla, who said I had the most beautiful smile she's ever seen. So this was actually going really well for me. But, like most of my antics, this backfired on me big time. When I made this godforsaken decision all that time ago, I was sure I'd get away with it. However, about a week ago, the instructor decided to meet in real life and the lockdown in my country had been lifted. I spent all night watching videos and figuring out how to behave. I decided to pretend to also be completely dumb so I wouldn't have to speak in sign. It seemed very hard and I didn't want to try. So anyway, we meet up and everything goes well. No one uncovers my secret or anything. I spend the entire in real life meet with Carla, who's completely freaking stunning in real life. She's smart, funny, and she's kind. We keep handing each other notes on tissue papers and it's the cutest shit ever. I haven't been this attracted to anyone in my entire life. Toward the end of the meet, however, Carla hands me a tissue paper with one little heartbreaking sentence on it. "Will you date me?" That's when panic sets in. Part 2 of how I pretended to be deaf the entire quarantine. After pretending to be deaf in my class the entire quarantine and being asked out by a girl I fell for in the class, I panicked. I told her that I needed time to think and she was chill with it. So basically I prepared really hard for the date. I googled what the appropriate flowers for apologizing for your lives are and got her white orchids. I then put on my best clothes and set out. She came to the date with a cute little notepad and 2 pencils for us to write notes in, which melted me instantly, but I was so anxious and nervous at first that I couldn't bring myself to tell her. However, as we sat there waiting for our order to arrive, I kinda snapped because of the guilt and scribbled down into the notebook, "Hey, there's not an easy way to break this, but I'm not actually deaf. Or dumb." To which she replied with, "I know you're not deaf, but you are pretty dumb," with a smiley face. At which point I said, "What the F?" out loud. She then laughed and explained that she thought I was so cute that she Googled me long ago and found my Instagram, which has highlighted stories from concerts where I'm screaming and vibing. So she only asked me out to figure out how long I'd keep it going. So she was actually playing me the whole time. I was feeling pretty bummed that she only wanted to date me for that, but nevertheless, I apologized profusely and explained everything. I told her that I totally understand if she wants to end the date now, but she didn't. We had a great time and aren't officially dating or anything, but we do have a second date planned. She also told me that while she understands why I did what I did and that anxiety, especially social anxiety, is so hard to deal with, but she also believes that I was a little offensive, especially with the hearing aid. She explained to me why that was so insensitive and I'd like to apologize for anyone that I might have offended. It really wasn't my intention. Also, for our second date, we're planning to volunteer at a center for deaf kids so I can redo myself. I'm also learning the basics of sign language for the visit next week. Storytime about how I was stabbed 10 times while protecting my girlfriend. When I was younger, I had a girlfriend whose family was affiliated with the gang the Latin Kings. One night I was with her brother, and her mother in a store in the north side of Houston, which is the hood. We ran into the son, mother, and sister of this other family that they had a problem with. As soon as they spotted each other, they started talking trash back and forth. It escalated so much that the man from their family called out my girlfriend. In the hood, it's common for a woman to fight a man. I was stuck at first because I had never seen anything like this until that moment. However, I didn't hesitate. When he started inching towards my girlfriend, I walked up to him, grabbed him, and started swinging. I wasn't aware at the time that he had a weapon nor that he was using it on me during our fight. This went on for a few minutes until his family broke us apart. Then he went back to talking trash to my girl, and he finished it with, "Shut up, B, before I stab you too." At that moment, we all got quiet. I looked down and saw a puddle of blood under me. That's when the realization set in of what had happened. I was barely in any pain, but that's probably because my adrenaline was on fire. They quickly took off and we went back in the store. My girlfriend and her mom were crying. I remember sitting there and looking at the blood, then taking out a cigarette and smoking it as I waited. I felt nothing but peace in that moment. It was the most peaceful feeling I've ever experienced in my life. I guess it's because I knew that this was fixing to be it and none of it matters anymore. I was okay with the thought of death. However, it seems that my story wasn't meant to be over yet. I was rushed to the ER by an ambulance. At this point, the adrenaline had worn off and the pain started to set in. Every time I moved my neck, it felt like it was breaking. They cut open my stomach so that they could fix the internal bleeding. The doctor also told me that if the wound on the neck was a little to the right, I would have been paralyzed, and if it was a little to the left, I would have died. He also told me that if the wound on my rib had gone a centimeter deeper, my lungs would have been punctured. I guess I got lucky there. The recovery took over a year, and it was a long and painful process. My family cried and visited me every day when they found out. I was charged over $10,000 for the ambulance ride, surgery, and additional medical costs. It left me in crippling debt before my adult life even started. A few years later, I went to prison. My girlfriend from that time and I had broken up as she treated me terribly, and after 2 years, I was done. Her brothers had told me in the hospital that if I hadn't stood up and did what I did, they would have sorted me out themselves, so either way I would have gotten hurt. However, this experience taught me to never stand up for anyone unless they're worth dying for. I never saw my ex again until she appeared on the MTV show Catfish. I also never ended up paying those medical costs, and I hope they don't pursue me. I recently got out of prison and I've come to appreciate life because of its adversity. After 6 years in prison, I've come to enjoy the simplest things that people take for granted. I'm happier now than I've ever been. Am I the asshole for kicking my wife's father out of our wedding? My wife, 26, and I, 24, got married in early July. We decided to have a small 40-people wedding where masks were required, even for vaccinated folks. It was a dry wedding because my father used to struggle with alcoholism and I didn't want to trigger an accidental relapse. This was years ago, but I just wasn't willing to risk it. Instead, we offered virgin drinks and soda. Well, my wife's father didn't like this. My father-in-law was old friends with my dad and they'd gone through addiction together. My dad had taken the steps to get clean, but my father-in-law hadn't and still struggled. He constantly begged us to have an open bar at the wedding, saying that he didn't know if he could sit through the wedding sober. We ignored his request and held firm on the dry wedding. Well, that's when things went south. The ceremony passes and the reception begins. Everything is going well until we notice that my father-in-law is acting weird. Turns out he had bought a case of beer and hid it under one of the tables before the ceremony began. He was pestering my dad to drink with him just like old times. I was furious, beyond furious. I immediately called him out for his inappropriate behavior and demanded that he left. He started screaming at me, telling me that I was a dumb B and the F slur. My father-in-law and brother-in-law left, but my mother-in-law was pissed. She acted as though I didn't understand that he was addicted. I knew that, and if he felt like he couldn't go one night without it, then he shouldn't have showed up. However, his behavior was completely unacceptable. My wife feels that I'm justified in what I did, but my in-laws won't even talk to me. So, am I the asshole? My last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. No, he was 325 pounds, I was 120 pounds. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady. She made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years, we got married and almost immediately she bore me a daughter. I had a great job and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, my wife bore me a son. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. One day, while sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D, but just wrong. It was a square lamp base, red with gold trim on 4 legs and a white square shade. I was transfixed. I couldn't look away from it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning I didn't go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first. Soon I stopped that too and I wasn't eating or drinking. I stared at that effing lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me, but by this time my cognizance was breaking up and my wife was freaking out. She took our kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp is not real. The house is not real. My wife, my kids, none of that is real. The last 10 years of my life are not effing real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises and I became aware of pain. A shit ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk surrounded by people that I didn't know. Lots were freaking out and I was completely confused. At some point a cop scooped me up, dragged/walked me across the sidewalk and grass and threw me face down in the back of a cop car. I was still confused. He took me to the hospital and I got CT scans and stuff. I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane as I would cry myself to sleep hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He's perpetually 5 years old and I can never hear what he says. Recently, my older sister moved back into our parents' house after leaving her husband. We had a chat where she mentioned that her husband barely spends time with her and is no longer the same man that she married. She expressed how he's no longer energetic in the relationship and it's of all he does is work. Now, I stayed with my sister and her husband for 2 months while I was going through a rough patch with our parents. I've only moved back with my parents in the past month. While I was staying with my sister, it was pretty clear how the relationship was. She wasn't being the best of partners. She would work, go out with friends, and barely contribute anything to their relationship. Her job is a lot better and pays well compared to her husband's, whose job doesn't pay that well. He makes it up by working longer hours, and yet when he comes home, it's him who actually does all the household chores, from cleaning to cooking and doing the laundry and the shopping. I should also add that it's mainly him who takes care of the household expenses, even though my sister earns more. I felt disgusted by the way that she treated her husband, and I'll be honest, I got feelings for him. No matter how much he struggled, he wouldn't let it affect the way that he treated my sister. He would buy her flowers regularly, as well as cooking her romantic meals, which by the looks of things were unappreciated. He would try to talk to her, but she would much rather gossip with her friends, leaving him alone. I used to help out with some expenses and doing a few things like cooking and cleaning, which was appreciated by her husband. We used to chat, and he wouldn't badmouth her at all, but it was evident that he was struggling in the relationship. I even caught him crying once after an argument, which ended with my sister shouting, "You just aren't good enough." Today, her husband came to our parents' house to try and talk to her and fix what's wrong. She basically flogged him off, and this is when we began our chat. At this point, I couldn't hold back. I don't know if it was because of my feelings for him, but I basically told my sister all the things her husband does for her and how he treats her like a queen and how she's just acting like an ungrateful, entitled brat. Needless to say, she was upset. She also asked me point blank if I liked him, to which I broke down and said yes. She hasn't spoken to me since, and her husband messaged me saying how I crossed the line and shouldn't have said anything. On top of that, my parents are also pretty pissed at me too. Needless to say, I really messed up. What should I do? I'm 24 and I've been dating my boyfriend for 5 years now. We grew up together as neighbors and were friends for a couple years before dating. I love him so much and I want to marry him. His family is great and I adore them all, and he's great with my family too. He also formed a great relationship with my younger sister who's 21. The issue is that I think their bond is too close. My boyfriend and I live together, but he spends a lot of time with her. Albeit I am sort of busy. I'm currently in grad school for engineering, so I have to go to my classes. My boyfriend works full time. My sister is currently taking a gap year, but that 1 year has extended from when she was 18. She comes over when I'm in seminars and classes. They have tons of inside jokes and share the same sense of humor and taste in movies. It makes me feel left out, but when I try to include myself, they both stop being so enthusiastic and act like it's super awkward to have me there. My sister and I were close growing up, but started drifting when I went to uni. When my boyfriend isn't there and I talk to her, she becomes kind of cold and sometimes says rude things. Once she told me to my face that I'm not good enough for him and that he deserves better, which made me cry for a couple days. He also gets her gifts for the most random achievements, like he got her a present for making it through the week, even though she doesn't even do anything. She currently isn't working or trying to pursue a hobby or interest. She's just taking it easy, in her own words. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad my boyfriend and sister are friends, but my major problem is that my boyfriend tells her everything. Literally everything. He tells her things that he doesn't tell me and talks to her about me and our relationship. She knows all of our issues and good parts to a level of detail that I wouldn't even tell my closest friends or parents. She even knows the grades I got on my midterms and finals and what I think about my manager. I work part-time to contribute to our apartment, but also get paid for my research, which goes towards our needs as well, which I feel is unnecessary for her to know since I didn't tell her myself. I asked him to step back a bit and stop telling her things about me and our relationship, but he was shocked and told me that I'm an asshole for even requesting it. Now I feel guilty, so am I the asshole? My 69-year-old mother-in-law, Sandra, is a weird woman. She even refers to herself as that. She has random outbursts, hyperfixations, tics, and struggles immensely with social cues. She hasn't been diagnosed with anything, so I won't speculate. When I first met my husband's family, I noticed that all of them, except my husband, made fun of Sandra and her quirks. For example, we were having dinner one night and my mother-in-law couldn't stop talking about flowers. She loves plants and nature and is super knowledgeable about it. My sister-in-law made a comment making fun of her and everybody at the table laughed about it. Sandra got extremely embarrassed and didn't talk for the rest of the night. This kind of behavior is normal in the family and I despise it. I get so angry whenever someone makes fun of Sandra because she's just a kind, lovely woman that I just can't fathom why they would do that. I've had a lot of conversations about this with my husband and even fights when he laughs about the jokes. We have a 15-year-old son named Alex, and my biggest fear is coming true. Alex has started to pick up on the behavior around him and has been laughing at Sandra. I've talked to him about why laughing at her is bullying and how that behavior is inappropriate, etc., but Alex doesn't seem to care. 2 weeks ago, we went to see Sandra. My brother and sister-in-law were there along with their families. Sandra looked very happy. While catching up, she randomly started clapping. This is one of her tics that appear when she's excited. My brother-in-law made a comment poking fun of her and the whole family started laughing, including my husband and Alex. Sandra got teary-eyed and had to excuse herself to the bathroom. I have never been more furious. While on our way home, I chewed my husband and son out and told them not to speak to me until they apologized to Sandra. I told them that I don't want to hear a single word directed to me until they reflect on how their actions are hurtful and disgusting. 2 weeks have passed and I haven't spoken to them. Not a single word, because they've made 0 attempts to apologize to Sandra. My husband is telling me that I'm being petty and hurting Alex. He's also mad at me for valuing my relation with Sandra more than my relation with them. In my mind, I'm not doing that, but my husband says that I'm being an asshole. Am I wrong for refusing to talk to them until they apologize to Sandra?